All right, let's dive into a series of wars that did way more than just expand Rome's borders. We're talking about conflicts that completely shattered its 500-year-old political system and paved the way for an empire. These are the military campaigns of one of history's most brilliant and controversial figures, Julius Caesar. And this really is the big question, isn't it? It's something historians have been debating for literally 2,000 years. How could one man, with his sheer force of will and ambition, bring a republic that had stood for half a millennium to its knees?
You see, to get Caesar the general, you first have to understand Caesar the politician. Sure, he was born into an important family, but the Rome he grew up in, it was a total mess. Chaotic, dangerous, full of civil wars and political backstabbing. In a world like that, you either climb the political ladder or you get crushed. And Caesar, well, he was a master climber.
And his climb was incredibly fast and super calculated. It starts way back in 81 BC when he wins a major military honor. A little over a decade later, boom, he's a quaestor, a big deal financial role. Fast forward another 10 years and he reaches the absolute pinnacle. He's elected consul. And that success is what lets him line up his next big move, a 5-year gig as the governor of Gaul. Every single step was a stepping stone on his path to ultimate power.
Now, a huge piece of this puzzle was the First Triumvirate. This wasn't some official committee. Think of it more like a backroom deal between the 3 most powerful guys in Rome. You had Caesar, the popular politician, Pompey, the celebrated general, and Crassus, who was literally the richest man in the city. Together, they had all the money, muscle, and influence they needed to completely sideline their rivals in the Senate.
So why Gaul? Why was that so important? Well, this wasn't just about grabbing new land for Rome. See, as a governor, Caesar was legally immune from being prosecuted. And he desperately needed that because his enemies in the Senate were just waiting for him to become a private citizen so they could pounce. The governorship gave him 2 critical things: his own army and a 5-year shield from his political rivals. It was a massive gamble for survival and for power. And this is where the politician really becomes the legendary conqueror. The Gallic Wars were so much more than a conquest. This was the fire where Caesar forged a ridiculously tough and loyal army. He got fabulously wealthy from the spoils, and by fighting right there alongside his men, he built a force that was loyal to him personally, not to some distant senators back in Rome.
And just to get a sense of the sheer, brutal scale of this thing, just look at this number. The ancient historian Plutarch figured that over the course of the wars, Caesar's army killed 1 million people and enslaved another 1 million. I mean, this was a systematic and incredibly brutal campaign of subjugation. But we do have to add a little context here. Most modern historians are pretty skeptical of that exact figure. Ancient writers loved to pump up the numbers for dramatic effect, and let's be honest, Caesar had every reason to exaggerate his own victories for propaganda. So while the real number was probably lower, the devastation across Gaul was without a doubt immense. The whole war comes to a head at the Siege of Alesia. It's like something out of a movie. All the Gallic tribes had finally united under this brilliant leader, Vercingetorix, and he actually manages to trap Caesar. But Caesar's response was just audacious. He built a huge wall around the Gauls to starve them out, and then he built a second wall facing outwards to protect himself from the Gallic army coming to help. He was besieging and being besieged at the exact same time. It was an incredible move that forced a surrender and basically ended the war. So, with Gaul conquered, the stage was set for the most famous moment in Caesar's life. His term as governor was ending, his army was an unstoppable machine, and back in Rome, his enemies were sharpening their knives. The old triumvirate was history. Crassus was dead, and his old ally Pompey had now sided with the Senate against him. Caesar was now caught between a rock and a hard place. He wanted to run for consul again to keep his legal immunity, but the Senate, led by Pompey, gave him an ultimatum: disband your army and come back to Rome as a regular citizen. For Caesar, this was a death sentence. He knew the second he gave up his army, his enemies would prosecute him and destroy him politically. He was completely trapped. And so, on January 10th, 49 BC, he made his choice. He led a single legion across the Rubicon River. Now, this was the legal boundary of Italy. No general was ever supposed to cross it with an army. To do so was an act of treason. It was a declaration of war on his own country. As he crossed, he reportedly said the famous words, "Alea iacta est," the die is cast. There was absolutely no turning back. What followed wasn't some long, drawn-out war. Nope. This was a global blitz.
Caesar chased his enemies all across the Roman world with just breathtaking speed. He proved he was an absolute master of moving fast and hitting hard. The pace is just mind-boggling. First, he crushes Pompey's much larger army over in Greece. Then he chases him to Egypt, gets involved in their civil war, and puts Cleopatra on the throne. From there, he zips over to modern-day Turkey to annihilate a hostile king, before finally mopping up the last bits of resistance in North Africa and Spain. In just 4 years, he took out every single rival and was in control of the entire Roman world.
And this quote, it captures the whole vibe of his campaign perfectly. After that lightning-fast victory at Zilla, Caesar sent back a simple 3-word report to Rome. Veni, vidi, vici. I came, I saw, I conquered. I mean, that is the ultimate flex from a general who knew he was simply unstoppable.
So, the war is won. Caesar returns to Rome, not just as a general, but as the undisputed master of the Roman world. The big question on everyone's mind was, what on earth is he going to do with all this power? Well, he got to work right away with a whole slew of major reforms. He had himself made dictator, first for 10 years and then for life, making him a king in everything but name. He launched massive building projects, gave land to his veterans, fixed the grain supply for the poor, and, most famously, he completely overhauled the Roman calendar, creating the Julian calendar, which is basically the one we still use today. But, and this is the big but, this victory came at a profound cost. By concentrating all that power in his own hands, Caesar effectively broke the back of the Republic. The institutions that had balanced power for 500 years, the Senate, the assemblies, the elected officials, they were all made pretty much irrelevant. His personal triumph was the Republic's final failure. Which leaves us with the very same question that has defined his legacy ever since. Was Caesar a hero who rescued Rome from a corrupt, broken system and brought order to the chaos? Or was he a power-hungry tyrant who tore down a 500-year-old republic just for his own personal glory? Even 2,000 years later, that's not an easy one to answer.